Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the CDI Cybersecurity Webinar Series. For those of you who are coming off a late evening of holiday parties, I appreciate you joining, and obviously grab your first or maybe second cup of coffee. As some of you know who have joined other events, this is an opportunity for us to explore some of the hot topics going on in security in the marketplace. My name, if I haven't met you already, is Peter Brookman. I'm the AVP of Security for CDI. I'm happy to be here hosting this wonderful event. As you come up with questions during the conversation, things you want us to address, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to take time afterwards to reply to your questions directly through email. So today's discussion is around cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is a very hot topic in the marketplace for a number of reasons, whether or not it's because you're trying to renew your insurance and you're hearing about premium increases, or you're trying to get insurance and you're unable to receive it because of the requirements out there in the marketplace. So today we're going to talk about why it's become such a hot topic, what you need to do to prepare to get insurance, but more importantly, what do you do when an actual event occurs, right? Who do you contact? How do you prepare for it? How do you make sure your organization is ready for success? With us today, I'm very fortunate to have Tom Schrandt and Brian Dyche. Tom Schrandt is the VP of Locked In Professional. Tom has been in the insurance industry for over 23 years. And Locked In specializes in insuring small businesses, nonprofits, and franchises. Tom joined Locked In Affinity in 2013 as VP and producer and specializes in professional liability financial industry insurance. Prior to joining Locked In Affinity in 2013, Tom was a managing partner and founder of Professional Liability Consulting Group, PLCG, a national independent brokerage firm specializing in CPA and financial services, professional liability, and risk management solutions. From 2003 to 2013, Tom grew PLCG from a startup agency to over 1,700 national clients, managing over $12 million in gross written premiums. Prior to launching PLCG, Tom worked for Aon as national sales manager, responsible for over $90 million in endorsed professional liability premiums. Tom, thank you very much for joining today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Peter. Happy to be here.
Next, we have Brian Dyche. Brian is the CEO of Atlantic Data Forensics. He's been in the industry for over 25 years, leading and managing investigations and enterprise security programs. Atlantic Data Forensics is an internationally recognized company handling hundreds of forensic investigations and data breaches each year for clients in the US, Asia, and Middle East. Brian has over 25 years experience in investigations, computer forensics, incident response, and secure network architecture. Prior to joining and running ADF, Mr. Dyche was a co-founder of global computer security giant Mandiant. Brian regularly testifies as a computer forensic expert in U.S. federal and state court cases ranging from intellectual property theft to murder. For 6 years, Brian was a contract computer crime investigation instructor teaching at the FBI Academy, the FBI Regional Computer Forensics Lab, and many FBI field offices. Brian, thank you very much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
So, gentlemen, as we get started, what I'd like to propose is I'd like to hear your perspective on why is this topic of cyber insurance becoming such a concern in the marketplace? Tom, do you mind kicking things off?
Absolutely, no problem, Peter. Thank you. So, yeah, at the highest level, I mean, the state of the cyber liability insurance marketplace is officially in a hard market, as us insurance geeks, state. I haven't seen a class of insurance like the state of cyber liability since really after 9/11. The reinsurance marketplace got completely crazy, as you can imagine, after the catastrophe. I liken what's going on in the cyber liability market to that market from a capacity perspective. But just generally speaking, what's going on in the space is that claims are up. I don't think anybody would be surprised to hear that. The pandemic, our friend, the pandemic, has certainly aided to a lot of that that exposure for folks. You know, obviously taking a secure work environment and going remote just completely got a lot of fraudsters around the countries extremely excited, you know, to tap into some vulnerabilities, you know, that our U.S. companies are facing. So we're definitely seeing claims up at astronomical rates. Obviously, what happens then, the insurance carriers respond, right? So premiums are up 4 times, we're seeing, you know, on some renewal recent, you know, clients. We're seeing, you know, carriers take a, you know, obviously a more premium, but they're reducing coverage at the same time. So it's sort of a, you know, getting hit from an insured perspective from both angles, so to speak. You're getting lower limits on certain types of coverage. You're getting higher retentions or deductibles, more skin in the game. And just pre-pandemic, there was a ton of capacity from insurance companies' perspective. They, you know, it was very easy to apply for, easy to get, easy to pay for. But now we're seeing this capacity just skirt from the marketplace, and it's getting challenging. And the sophistication of the underwriting is getting pretty intense. I mean, we're working with, we're independent, right? So we work with every cyber liability carrier out there, and we have some exclusive ones that we work with in London as well at Lockton. But we're seeing some pretty, I would say, cool underwriting that's going on from a proactive perspective. And I'm sure Brian can speak to this far more technically. But basically, just to say what's going on, not only are you just taking an application and applying for cyber liability insurance, the actual underwriter is running their own test on that applicant or company and scoring you on a cybersecurity type of exposure. So, and factoring that into the premiums. So it's getting, you know, from boring insurance applications to some pretty slick, you know, sophisticated underwriting. And obviously why? Because claims are happening.
Yeah. It's interesting, Tom. I mean, in what is already a very tough business marketplace, to think that your premiums are increasing by over 4 times from the previous year. I mean, we're all fighting to get dollars to help secure our environments, and that's just another challenge that we don't want to have to deal with. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Brian, you know, I know you have, I'd like to hear your perspective on the marketplace, and even, you know, maybe we can even hone on to what Tom mentioned about underwriting requirements, right? What are you seeing
Right.
out there? What are people challenged with?
Yeah, so in previous years, and one of the things we do is we help our clients, you know, of course, fill out their insurance paperwork for this, because a lot of times they're not kind of clear on, you know, what the best thing to say here is or something like that. But in previous years, we saw an average application might be 6 to 10 pages long, kind of very, you know, like any other liability policy sort of thing, you know. Do you have, you know, have you done this? Have you done this? Do you have policies around this? Do you have somebody appointed to do that sort of thing? In the last couple of years, we've seen these applications grow to, we handled one the other day that was over 60 pages long. It was just this tome of a document asking very in-depth questions about controls and you know, how were these specific things being handled? Obviously written by somebody very technical, but much more difficult to fill out. And you know, my client's concern obviously was, I don't feel like we maybe have all the things now that I've been through all these questions and so forth. And as Tom said, there's also starting to be some requirements to actually produce, you know, show us that you have this, demonstrate to us. We want to run, you know, this sort of testing on your network or on your IAM process. Show me that you actually have some of these things in place, make it demonstratable, or you're gonna, you know, we'll still insure you, of course, but it's going to require a higher premium to do that. And I think Tom hit a really important one too, is we have started to see some very defined limits, especially around things like ransomware payments, like much predefined, not to exceed $500,000 or something like this. So while the price, as you said, as the prices have gone up, there's getting to be some real sticky points in there for we don't cover this anymore.
Brian, thanks for the feedback. It's a very interesting point, because for many years we've watched the diligence requirements between our clients and their customers grow and grow and grow. right? At times you can't even do business with certain customers without filling out 40, 50-page documents. Right now it's coming from the insurance carriers. So it's quite a challenge and something, I'd like to hear from you guys, how is it that your firms are helping these clients kind of deal with these challenges in the marketplace? Brian, maybe you want to start?
I'll take that one if that's, because Brian made a great point in the application process, which is challenging at times. But what we do as brokers, and risk managers, for our clients is we try to communicate to the underwriters or the carriers things that aren't really on the application. Like, hey, we're working with this vendor, Atlantic Forensics, CDI, and we're doing this type of things. It may or may not be in one of the 60-page applications. Sure it is, but highlighting that to the underwriter, like, look, we're working with true professionals. We're on this. As an applicant, we acknowledge the exposure. We invest it, with the proper professionals, and we want to get insurance. So that's a far better story, in a submission to an underwriter than here's my application, how much is the premium type thing.
Yeah, Tom's absolutely right. That's exactly the type of feedback that we put into this. So the question asked me for A or B, and we elaborate on it extensively. This is where we were 2 years ago. Here's the program we put in place. We're building to this point. Here's our project timeline for when we're going to be at this specific place with this. Showing that we the company take this very seriously, and we are working towards that place. But it's as we all know, you don't go from zero to secure overnight. It's a period of years to get to where you want to be. But talking to those improvements that have been put in place year over year, talking to the, obviously hitting that, we are now doing this much more, detection or response or whatever it might be, than what we were doing previously. Of course, encouraging them to feel like, yes, there's a strong security program at this company, and this is somebody that we should insure because they're doing the right things.
It's just definitely worth the effort of doing that, especially in this market today, because, underwriters are skeptical by nature. And the whole point of applying is to get them comfortable with that that risk, and things like that. They eat it up, underwriters, that is, and they really, it's meaningful, and it's discretionary. It's premium. It's not like workers' comp type insurance. You're in California, you have X amount of employees. Here's your premium type thing. They're looking and digging into it, extensively.
It's interesting. I talk about like the art of the conversation, right? That's what this comes down to, right? It's how do you communicate effectively? This could be one of your, listen, as a gentleman who comes from a sales organization, could be one of your most difficult sales calls as a client to your insurance carrier, right? And how do you communicate effectively that your organization is proactive, responsive, you got the right programs in place, and if you don't, what are you doing to get there, right?
That's right.
Despite all your internal challenges, right? And coming down from your board and your executive saying, do more with less. So it's a great point. So I do want to spend some time, because I think it's really important that as clients prepare to meet these requirements, right? Check the boxes, they do all those things, they then sit back and say, hey, I feel good, I have my insurance. But then the most important thing is when they get hit with an event, right? And they start scrambling, because I know you too, and I've been part of conversations with you and clients, they've called us up at midnight and said, Peter, I've just got hit with ransomware, the computers are down, what do I do? Brian, I'd love to hear your perspective, and then Tom on how we can help clients.
Sure. So yeah, that's always the big question. Okay, I've got the policy ready, oh no, it just happened, right? And so what we do with our clients is, of course, we're pre-approved by their insurance carrier. So the carrier knows who we are, they're comfortable with us and our rates and all that sort of thing. So that when that event does happen, and it is usually 4 or 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning on a Saturday or something like this, especially on a long weekend when people detect that there's a problem, with ransomware. So they'll make that 1-800 call to us. we get everybody, all the players on the phone, try and get the, what's the story as best you know it right now. And we focus on the first part of it, which is containment. Okay, here's what we have to do right now to make it not get any worse. But we also start to task people out to do certain things. One of those tasks is get in touch with your broker, get in touch with your carrier, let them know that, we have an incident right now. We've already started the containment process. But we think we're going to probably make a claim against our policy. Now you can decide, a couple hours in or 2 days in, this looks small enough. I don't think we really need to do that. But you're oftentimes required by the policy to notify them within 24, 48, 72 hours of that. Now, if you do decide to make a claim, they will usually appoint cyber breach counsel, which is an attorney, to go along with this process. And then how that works is the attorney provides attorney-client privilege protection over the top of the whole investigation that's going on. Because as you head into one of these things, you don't know exactly where this is all going to come out at the end of the day, right? It might start out looking like, well, it's ransomware, it's an internal threat actor and things like that. And, 4 months down the road, we figure out, oh, wait, some employee internally gave somebody a bunch of data that they then used and so on. It's actually going on right now with one of the big equipment vendors. They had a large scale breach, Ubiquity, a couple of years ago. As that investigation proceeded through, they determined that an employee internally had been working with an outside party, actually ended up giving them access to systems that then led to the breach and so on. So it's good to have legal counsel in there. Also, one of the parts that people initially never think about in ransomware is that data that gets exposed, right? Most of your ransomware threat actors nowadays do what they call double extortion. So not only do they encrypt your systems, but they steal a bunch of data. Sometimes it's not so much 40, 80 gigabytes. We've seen as much as 2.5 terabytes of data. Actually, I think that threat actor messed up. I think they grabbed a whole lot more data than they really wanted. But in there, they target things like HR data, employee data, customer data, anything that says confidential or legal on it. They want all that sort of stuff. So the attorneys are very much going to be involved in, from that data that was taken, what do we have to do from a reporting basis? And if you're a company that has, clients and employees all over the US, that means reporting to up to 53 states attorneys generals, and different standards on different timelines. So they're kind of doing that whole piece for you at the same time while we're investigating how it happened, making sure that it's contained and doing all the remediation and cleanup that's necessary after one of these events. And over the top of all that is your insurance carrier, of course, going, how much is that going to cost? Have you done this? Did you check for this? They're always in there kind of doing sort of an overwatch, making sure that everything's proceeding as expected. And if there's any additional resources required, that they know about that early on.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've become much more diligent about that, where the money's going, right? You said it's not
Yeah.
the Wild West anymore like it was years ago. A couple of things you mentioned that I just really want to emphasize because I see it all the time. Pre-approval with a forensics investigation firm on your insurance policy.
Yep.
Because you and I, Brian, have been, and Tom, we've been in conversations where a client calls us and they're like, well, I called my insurance carrier and now they said they'll get back to me in 2 or 3 days when they select the forensics team. That doesn't have to happen. You can be proactive about that and have someone assigned to your policy ahead of time. The other thing is obviously tri-party relationships and the sensitivity around that. You need to be aware of that, as you mentioned. Attorney-client privilege is essential because you don't know where these things are going to go. And then the last thing, which I thought was very interesting, you mentioned, when you said they took more information than they expected, but we're all probably saying, well, that's kind of weird because you think like, if a bank robber is going in and they hit the, you know, but the reality is these guys want to, or these adversaries in general, want to take just enough and leave a few breadcrumbs up behind so they can come back and get more. If they take too much, then they blow up their opportunity for the future. So
Right. They want to take enough data to bring pressure on you, but not so much as to be burdensome to themselves. And some of the more sophisticated groups, so the groups working through these ransomware affiliation groups, have actually designed their own tools specifically for that purpose. So it's already got built-in search terms. It's got date ranges. Who wants 8-year-old documents? Nobody cares about that. We want documents created within the last 120 days that we're going to steal. Things that are going to worry you the most. And they've built automated exfiltration tools for that are really quite effective and very fast. I hate to say it, but they make some really good use of cloud architecture and things like this to steal data from people.
Hey, Brian, we're throwing the word around ransomware, and I was wondering, just take 2 minutes and just maybe walk the audience through what exactly that is. They probably are aware, but I think it's worthwhile,
Sure.
just going from a very high level, like what happens.
Yeah, so let me kind of walk you through the process. So a lot of folks still have this in their head that Tom over in marketing clicked on a link in his email and that's how we all got ransomware. That hasn't been how we got ransomware in quite a while now. What happens is Tom clicked on a link in his email, thought it was from the IT department, updated his Microsoft account password and things like that, and they got Tom's password. But Tom's in marketing. He's not an IT person. He doesn't have admin creds, things like this. The next thing the threat actor does is they'll actually log in directly through your VPN or your portal or your Citrix or whatever you use to access your network. And then they'll go about one, elevating, moving from Tom's, user credentials up to admin credentials, as well as getting an idea of what your network looks like, where your backups are, things like this. They always target Active Directory servers and domain controllers and things like that. Most of the time, we see them actually operate from those systems. And once they feel like they've got a layout of your network and they know where the critical stuff is, they'll exfiltrate the data. And the last thing they do is either, typically we see from the actual Active Directory server themselves, sometimes they'll use another server as a home base. They will go ahead and set up a group policy to distribute the ransomware binaries around, which actually goes through and encrypts not everything on your system in most cases. It only looks for user documents, right? So all your Office documents, PDFs, database files, QuickBooks files, pictures, all that sort of stuff. It leaves your operating system files and Windows files and things like this alone. But it encrypts that data up very quickly, and then it's done. One of the things I often, clients often worry about is, well, the ransomware threat actor could still be in my network. They could come back. Do they get into my email, or are they in my, cloud environment, things like this. And your ransomware threat actor groups are very simple criminals, if you will. They're kind of like, smash and grab jewelry store criminals that just run in with a hammer and break the glass and scoop up whatever they can get and run out. They're looking to get, paid, to either sell you back a decryption key or to not publish the data on the dark web or things like this. They don't spend much time doing anything else in your network. They do just enough to distribute the ransomware, create the situation that they want, and very, very seldom do we see any kind of, long-term backdoor play and things like this. Not to say that it doesn't happen. Some groups do that, but there's less of that in this environment, which the good news is it kind of makes it easier to clean up if you've done the necessary preparation ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Having good offsite backups is really key right now. Mm-hmm. If you're not doing that for critical systems, you should make that a priority for the new year.
Yeah, and I'll just one selfish plug. One of the things we do here at CDI LLC is we have what we call our controls validation program, where we emulate the adversarial's behaviors proactively for our clients to see how they would respond. Right, so you can really get ahead of it, be offensive. but I know we only have a couple minutes left. And Tom, I did want to give you the floor for a moment. I know you have a very interesting perspective coming from the carrier space. What would you suggest in terms of what advice would you give the audience towards preparing for having the right insurance and program?
Yeah, I would say take your time and put some effort into an assuming you have insurance, put your application together with some thought. Utilize the vendors that you're working with to really spruce up that form, because now more than ever, like we discussed, it's important: price, coverage. Two, I would say understand your policy, because like I said, we work with every carrier out there and they're not all the same, especially in cyber liability. And so specifically, we're talked a lot about ransomware, which is prevalent, in this small to mid-sized, market. Over 70% or less than 1,000 employees are getting hit with these type of things. So understand your coverage, because you might buy a $2 million cyber liability policy, but it might have $500,000 worth of ransomware sublimited somewhere within the policy. So dig in, challenge your broker or your agent, that you're buying it from. Have your coverage reviews. We're happy to help, do coverage reviews if that helps, anybody in the audience as well. Just give an unbiased opinion. But, just understand your coverage and take your time applying for it.
Tom, one of those areas where we see that all the time where people didn't get a good look at the policy ahead of time was in business email compromise that then leads to ACH fraud and wire fraud and things like this. Folks commonly think that their cyber policy is going to cover that, and it covers part of it, but not the part they want.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other conversation probably, but that fraudulent instruction is probably equal. And I work with a bunch of financial services, firms in the verticals that I'm in, and we see it daily. But I mean, not only is it sublimited, but now carriers are putting in some requirements to actually trigger the coverage. For example, like you can't just, dual check two pieces of data information and release client money. Now the carriers in the policies are saying you need to call your client or there is no coverage, things like that. So really dig into the details of the coverage, understand the limits of each section of the policy and what you need to do to get coverage in place and what you have resource wise when it happens.
So I know we're out of time, but a couple of things I just want to leave the audience with. So first of all, this conversation we can have for hours. What we're going to do as a group, we're going to take this show on the road starting in first quarter, come out to your local territories and sit down with whoever would like to talk further about this discussion and provide further help. So look out for that. The other thing is, obviously, we're going to continue to have these webinar series. The next one's on January 10th. We're going to be talking about managed detection and response, which is about having 24/7 SOC at your disposal. So I hope you'll join that as well. But lastly, and most importantly, Brian, Tom, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to speak with us. I also want to thank you in advance for taking the time to help answer the questions that are coming up in the chat. I see a lot of questions. You guys everybody on the phone will get an email from Tom and Brian regarding responses. And I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. And thank you once again for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.